Ukrainian Women's Organizations at the United Nations, founder of the Ukrainian Women's Initiative in United Arab Emirates, and Deputy Chair of Strada Ukraine NGO. I want to thank all of you for finding time and joining us, joining our Zoom activities. So let's start, and I would like to give the floor to Ms. Kateryna. Ms. Kateryna, so what can we say? We understand that 2 weeks after this conference are already through. So talking about results, what did URC 2025 demonstrate when it comes to evolution of gender mainstreaming and inclusion? Please, the floor is yours. Oh, good morning, dear colleagues, dear listeners, spectators, everyone who is joining us online, who is listening to us and watching us. Obviously, it was not the first conference on recovery of Ukraine, and I personally see that it's a logical continuation of implementation of principles that were laid as foundation of the declaration dated 2022, the declaration adopted after the results of the conference, that year's conference. And those were the principles of recovery of Ukraine supported by our international partners, donors, and the state of Ukraine. And one of such principles is the principle of gender equality and inclusion. Then another evolutionary phase was the creation of the platform of gender mainstreaming upon the results of the conference in London in 2023 that helped us unite at the national level those actors of recovery as government agencies, civil organizations, civil actors, advisory panel of civil organizations that Ms. Nataliia might tell you more about. In the year 2024, upon the results of the conference in Berlin, an international alliance of gender responsible recovery was established. That was a union of the countries and businesses and civil organizations that have undertaken an obligation within that technical aid, material technical aid coming to Ukraine to adhere to the important principles of gender integration, to allocate funds, to work with the matters of gender equality, to use the tools related to ensuring of equal rights and opportunities. We had a meeting of the Alliance in Rome on the 9th of July. And I'm really happy to inform you that we have 34 new members among those who support this international global union. And it's another evidence of the fact that this initiative is alive and is developing. We got such countries as Iceland and Austria joining us, along with Ireland and Croatia, as well as other business organizations such as Ferexpo or Marie Claire Business, Burtak Media Ukraine. We were also joined by the international organizations such as Folke Bernadotte Academy, UNESCO, and United Nations Agency, for which gender equality is one of the fundamental principles. Norwegian people aid a lot of civil organizations, both Ukrainian and foreign. For example, International Fund of Vidrodzenia, Gender Association, or Smart Organization, Voice Over Me, and others. So the alliance continues living and developing, and it tells us that the number of our partners is growing, the number of people who understand the importance of gender recovery is growing. And during the activities that were held, and this year we had a panel that was held together with the governments of panel, and it was attended by the then Minister of Justice, Vice Prime Minister on European Integration, Olga Stefanishyna, the Minister Minister of Family and Birth of Italy, Ms. Roccella. There was a number of roundtables in the platform of the conference, a number of multilateral meetings with different organizations, including UN Women, that was represented by its deputy head. And what's also important, this topic was also touched upon in other platforms, not only during our gender recovery panel. In particular, I'm happy to state that the activity that was organized by the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine in cooperation with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, with Bernadotte Academy, and there was a presentation of the Charter of Human Capital based on the principles of gender equality. And during that conference, for the first time, a memorandum was signed on cooperation between the Presidium of Council of Ministers of Italian Republic and the Government Commissioner on Gender Equality that opened a new phase of intergovernmental cooperation aimed at ensuring gender equality and expansion of participation of women in economic and political life. So our plans are quite ambitious. There was an announcement made about the intensification of support on part of European Union when it comes to gender equality. That was mentioned by Kateryna Maternova, the ambassador of EU to Ukraine, who also announced the new aid package in amount of 7 million euro to ensure the gender equality. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to be done, and it's important to make sure that those mechanisms that we have are included in the programs of development at the local and national level. Ms. Kateryna, let me ask you right away, what were the tasks that we got for the future? What are the steps we have to take in order not to lose this pace, not to lose this momentum? Well, you know, one of the important tasks is not to lose the momentum. That's right thing that requires additional effort. That's something we need to continue working on, and we need to continue implementing the gender equality as a systemic element of the recovery process. That's why we plan to have a meeting of the Commission on coordination of operations of the government agencies when it comes to gender equality. We are going to train more specialists for the public service of Ukraine, as well as continue monitoring the programs of local development, to what extent gender component is included in those programs, gender audits, gender-oriented budgeting, gender expertise, gender analysis that are now adopted in Ukraine at the level of legislation. It's important for us to continue working with the donors, to continue our communication at all levels, to increase the amount of resources for implementation of such projects, to support the initiatives of women's leadership, as well as inclusion of larger number of businesses. That's quite an important priority, because economy is the foundation of social development, and Ukrainian businesses are really open to this topic. That's why such work with the business sector will be a priority for the Alliance and for the platform for the years to come. Thank you, Ms. Tetiana. A question to you then. Ms. Kateryna has mentioned the UN Women's Agency. You are the one who's representing UN Women in Ukraine. We know that it's an agency that coordinates the work of the Alliance for Gender-Sensitive and inclusion in Ukraine. So what was the plan for URC 2025? What are your conclusions? What is the summary for you? Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Ms. Kateryna Levchenko, Ukrainian Women's Fund, and other partners for organization of this meeting, because it's important to reflect and outline the further steps when it comes to work in the sector of gender equality and inclusion. So rushing a little bit ahead, I'm really curious to hear your feedback, your impressions, so we could consolidate and analyze them. And getting back to your question, what did Alliance come to the Rome conference with? Well, let me remind you that International Alliance unites a lot of partners, and basically we came to conference in Rome with a clear goal to assist the systemic inclusion of gender equality and women's leadership in the processes of recovery of Ukraine. And the key word here is systemic. This work should be taking place at all levels with all of the partners. Alliance, together with the platform of gender mainstream and advisory panel of the civil society that was mentioned by Ms. Kateryna, was created to unite and coordinate the efforts to ensure that recovery of Ukraine is more inclusive and equal. And in order to do this, it was important that the recovery processes are supposed to be based on the principles of inclusion, human rights, and gender equality. On top of that, for Alliance, it was important to demonstrate that there is certain synergy, and all of the partners, governments, international organizations, civil society, businesses, they all share those values and that vision, and not only on paper or in press releases. And this is exactly what we're going to discuss today, because it seems to us that to a certain extent we were able to make it. Again, I would like to hear your feedback. And in this regard, I would like to emphasize a number of things. What did we come to the conference with? As an alliance, Ms. Kateryna has already mentioned a number of new members who joined us. And really, within a year after the establishment of the alliance in Berlin, the alliance expanded to 96 members, and 34 more joined after the last year's conference. And among the partners, it's important to mention the government of such countries as Canada, Germany, or Austria, Iceland, Croatia, Norway. They've already announced their membership in the alliance during the conference. Those are the representatives of medium and large-sized businesses, such as Ferrexpo and others, the civil society organizations, and they are the most numerous among the members of the alliance, the technical aid projects. And it seems like during the recovery conference in Rome, the alliance demonstrated its ability to consolidate the efforts of international and national partners, and to a certain extent influence the political and financial processes. And as an evidence of that, it's important to mention that the members of the alliance confirmed not only their formal support, but really mentioned their intention to invest financial resources to support the initiatives that support the women and their interest in the processes of recovery. Ms. Kateryna has mentioned it, and I want to emphasize it too, because we're humbled by the fact that it was announced about additional funding in amount of 7 million euro that will be aimed directly at intensification of role of the women in political, economic, and societal life, building of government capacity in implementation of gender-oriented reforms, and support of women's organizations. And again, let me repeat myself, it's important for those obligations not to stay formal, but to have those funds aimed at intensification of gender initiatives. We know that according to the latest data from Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, out of $19 billion of aid, less than half of 1% were allocated to gender equality. So let's see what will be the statistic data for the year 2024. We'll find it out in the beginning of 2026, and then we will be able to make an objective comparison. Another thing I would like to mention, the task the alliance was pursuing during the conference is the advocacy when it comes to consideration of women's interest in different initiatives. The alliance keeps working on engagement of new members to increase its coverage and to raise awareness. And today the role of alliance is important as it has never been, because funding of the programs of gender equality by donors is at the low level in Ukraine. At the same time, the political resistance is growing. We know when it comes to expansion of women's rights at the global level, and it impacts the exercising of women's rights in Ukraine. So the alliance was created to achieve sustainable results and continuous advocacy. And in this process, it's important to share the best practices in such platforms, and those who were attending the conference were able to see where they were taking part in the activities that Ms. Kateryna was mentioned, those that were organized by the governments of Ukraine and Germany and other partners. There was a lot of partners who were sharing their experience, their best practices, including DTEC. They were mentioning about the experience of involving women in work in traditionally men's jobs, or Lika Comfort, who are specializing in climatic systems. They were telling about the way they train the women to maintain their air conditioners. So such platforms, such sharing of experience is important, because this is what demonstrates and this is what encourages that those things work and they can be done. And a fourth component, very important for us as UN Women Agency, is ensuring of participation of different categories of population in the conference. Thanks to the support of UN donors, 15 representatives of women organizations, 5 representatives of local authorities, and 5 representatives of businesses were taking part in the conference as participants of side events and as the signatories of the memorandum. And I would like to mention that among the members of Alliance, which represent the civil society, those are the organizations headed by the women, and it provides for a unique opportunity to the leaders of Ukraine to expand their networks, to exchange, share their experience, to join their efforts, and hopefully we will hear from representatives of the civil society. And what's also important, another important achievement of this conference in Rome, is that the topic of gender equality, unlike during previous conferences, was more openly sounded during different panels and discussion platforms. That's in brief. If I got the second part of your question right, so what are the tasks pending? Or I'm rushing a little bit ahead. Yes, exactly.
Well, I will try to make it brief. We are looking at 2025, 2026, the next conference that will happen in Poland, and the alliance is posing for themselves the following goals: monitoring of the programs of inclusion and gender equality on all levels, and promotion of gender responsible financement methodology. This means implementation of this methodology within different organizations that are working within the framework of the gender equality. And this is exactly where the work with our foreign partners is bringing fruits, including financial portion of these fruits, and creation of the platform as one of the members of the alliance, and creation of the platform for networking and communication. Initiation of advocation for the demands of women, and the discussions with the NATO organization of the alliance, and the way it is organizing, it is arranging the work of its subdivisions when it comes to cooperation with Ukraine on domestically and abroad, and also the provision of necessary things for the operation of the gender equality, gender mainstreaming organizations, I would like to say that this is where the alliance is trying the best in changing the way that women are perceived in our society. So what we're aiming for is not only for the women to take part in different initiatives, but also becoming leaders in the industry. And this will be along the lines of the restoration and also development of Ukraine in the future. And all of this are just words that need to be proven in the future to be true, and that is why I'm hoping to hear a lot of feedback from our partners and friends. Thank you, Mr. Tetiana, and this was a very strategic view. Miss Alisa, I would like to engage with you too. You're representing the women who are survivors of the sexual assault. And what are the perspectives that your organization has seen as a result of the URC 2025 for Ukraine? Hello, dear colleagues, everybody who listens to us. I would like to thank, first of all, Ms. Kateryna Levchenko for our voice being able to be present in such a high-level meeting. And this for me, it was a first-time experience of such a level of conference. First of all, I would like to say that it was really pleasant for me to hear the change in the narratives that the women that are survivors of sexual violence. There was a lot of narratives about the development of the leadership among these women, and about how these women should be used as engines of the process of restoration. And what we have observed as a member of this organization is that the participation of the women especially when it comes to such trauma, such psychological trauma that is taken away, the self-control, the confidence in oneself. The key moment right now for the realization of projects like this is exactly a creation of common projects, cooperative projects with our partners, which is in fact in practice helps to helps in many ways to those who are participating in them. As I have mentioned before in different interviews, I was talking about different women of Ukraine and how we talked to them and how we saw that the women in Ukraine have finally started not only getting the help, mental help that she requires, but also becoming empowered to also become someone who changes the structure of society and in the way that the society perceives women like this. And I would like to mention that the fact of mentioning these survivors of the sexual violence happened very rarely before. I have never heard this to be a thing, and I have known some people that have gone through some really tough challenges in their lives, and it was really important for us to make the voices of people like this be heard. And the process of development of the gender equality in our society is expressed in this way. Thank you for representing us during this conference. I would like to give word to Miss Sofia. Miss Sofia is representing the organization of the Rural Women Business Network. And Miss Sofia, I would like to hear what opportunities have you seen during this conference? What could the benefits be? Hello, thank you for your question. And I would like to say that for me, there were two panels that were important. Those were exactly directed at the development of the financial sector within the domain of agricultural activities, and our panel was united with the panel of the URC, but also I attended another panel that was dedicated to the security, to the food security, to the economy of the food. The agricultural sector is one of those sectors that includes women initially more than in other sectors, and this is we see this as opportunity for development and provision of financial means for future development of our alliance. And we have had a discussion with Italian representatives of Italian agricultural business. We had discussed how important it is to implement agricultural initiatives for the women that live in the agricultural locations in a village, in a suburban locations. There was a few speakers, and I liked one of them saying that the war in Ukraine, that the battle for Ukraine is a civilizational choice of the whole world. And if we could perceive the food as a weapon, we could also use the food to gain our liberty. And while this is mostly philosophical sentences, they are having some practical implications for the women in our agricultural sector. And the food security all around the world is developing in such a way that Ukrainian villages are capable to offer something to the international market. And this is about the balance of the people, not only financial tools of the business development. And it gives us hope that the people that gather during these panels, especially such high-level panels, are actually thinking about how the rich resources of Ukraine could be used in an efficient manner. And as of today, in Ukraine, the people who are buying food here in Ukraine. Those who had a light breakfast this morning, European people who had a breakfast like this morning, they should understand that a lot of this food was produced in Ukraine. And we do have a certain level of self-sustainability when it comes to the food security. And this is where we managed to involve a few major organizations, including WFP. And we are hoping that the program of support will cover not only business, but not only major businesses, but also middle sector and smaller businesses. Also, it is important to note that this was actually the women's conference, and this is where we are seeing opportunities of working in the food distribution networks, and this is where a few success stories could be heard during this conference. A lot of different topics, including the work of agricultural sector in Ukraine during the conditions of war and the infrastructure that has been damaged in a very significant way. We're still showing possibilities and capabilities for development, and this is where we took something from this platform is two agreements within the agricultural sector that will benefit the women, most of all, first and foremost, that will be working in the agricultural sector. And during our speeches, we not only talked about how resilient and how powerful we are, but we showed that we are real people who are making a good product, and also each of us has individuality. That's why we did not talk in slogans only, and we showed to our partners that we are ready for the intensification of partnerships with our foreign partners. This was the first memorandum. The second memorandum we signed as Ukrainian women business actors and agricultural business actors, and this allowed us to receive a new channel of cooperation with the world market. Apart from producing food, goods and services, we also need to efficiently export them. And this is not something that's really a mechanical process. This is mostly a human process. And what I have seen is the crossing of the human and business dimensions. And this is where if we want to have results, we will be expecting it in this crossing. And from my perspective, with the prism, with the bias that I had when I was visiting, when I was going to visit the conference. And after I have received the opportunity to freely talk and promote our agenda, I have seen that these opportunities might bring results, especially if we take into account the situation in the rural areas in Ukraine, where there is still attacks are going on against simple villagers. We need to develop new kind of instruments, new kind of tools that are going to be also resilient. For me, the most important during this conference was networking, communication. Ms. Tetiana mentioned a string of women's organizations, some representatives of business circles. If these actors could be united, this is where it could be a biggest synergy. This is, in my opinion. Thank you, Ms. Sofia, for your opinion, for your thoughts. Ms. Mariana is representing the Women's Organizations Alliance of International Alliance, and she is representing Ukraine. And this is very important for all of us to understand the involvement of Ukraine of this organization in the restoration of Ukraine. So, how did your organization participate in this conference?
Miss Mariana, please turn the sound on. My apologies. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for invitation, both to take part in the conference and the press conference taking place now. Well, really, the diaspora and the women's diaspora of Ukraine has a great potential, and the Global Alliance of Ukrainian Women's Organizations that I was representing during URC is one of the oldest Ukrainian diaspora unions, and within 66 years, we've been preserving the voice of Ukraine on the global level. We were cherishing Ukrainian identity and standing for Ukrainian interest, even back in the day when Ukraine didn't have its sovereignty. Today, we're uniting 46 organizations in more than 30 countries, and it demonstrates the potential that we have for participation in the recovery process of recovery of Ukraine. And despite being one of the oldest diaspora organizations, diaspora unions and networks, that was the first time when we were taking part in the recovery conference. We really appreciate the input of the government commissioner for gender equality for invitation, and we were represented both during the panel on women's leadership and during the laboratorium of the diaspora as an active instrument of the global union. I would like also to emphasize that it's something that we consider as an important moment for diaspora, to have women included in the processes of establishment of alliance and engagement of Ukrainian diaspora in the processes of recovery of Ukraine. That was announced during the laboratory, and it's supposed to be established within the 6 months to come, and different diaspora organizations are invited to take part. Those are important things, and I think that those messages that we were coming with, they were not so numerous, but they were quite focused. And really, first of all, one of the first messages was about millions of people identifying themselves as Ukrainians, and significant fraction of that diaspora are the women who have their personal ties, their personal expertise, who understand foreign cultures, and in synergy it may all intensify and enrich the processes of recovery of Ukraine. We're talking about the women from the first wave of immigration, so-called stable diaspora, and those who left after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, or the Ukrainian females living abroad as expats. So the approaches to gender inclusion in recovery processes should also take place outside Ukraine. We also think that engagement of Ukrainian diaspora, Ukrainian women, is supposed to be institutionalized. There should be dedicated mechanisms existing for continuous participation rather than ad hoc participation from time to time. We address the government and the development partners so such mechanisms could be implemented and Ukrainian women's organizations abroad could be involved on a continuous basis. Obviously, it's about the platform for ensuring of gender mainstreaming and advisory panel and the alliances, including the Gender Inclusion Alliance and Diaspora Involvement Alliance and other stakeholders. So what have we come with now that we talk about the steps on top of the official formalized part? We've already informed our members, our member organizations about the results of the conference, and we've prepared the platform for further discussion because soon we are going to have another conference, the Voice of Ukraine in the World, Advocacy of Rights and the Involvement of Recovery will be added to the agenda. Also, I would like to add that many members' organizations, or the large majority of them, are involved in the recovery processes. Maybe it's not so visible because there is no representation level and generalization in communications channel, but a lot of stakeholders are getting involved, and in this case we talk about the international, national and regional level, and for us as a network organization it's important also to structure this kind of activity by those four dimensions that were fundamental, that were serving as foundation for this recovery conference. Also, I would like to emphasize that the Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organization has been working for a lot of years to preserve the Ukrainian identity, and it's a pledge for preservation of ties of Ukrainians with their native land, with their homeland, and it's another precondition to bring Ukrainians back to Ukraine from abroad, and in this case we're talking about the human capital. We're going to continue working in this area. We have a lot of prospects here, and it's important for us as the global organization of Global Federation of Women's Organizations to understand how can we unite this human resources dimension with economic dimension, how can we assist in professional growth of Ukrainians abroad, their economic empowerment, and to what extent can we get involved in retraining of our female specialists who are staying abroad on a temporary basis, having them retrained to do the jobs that will be in demand in Ukraine after the end of the war. And again, it's another important nuance to remember. We also suggest to establish a task force that would include the members of the Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organizations to ensure safe return of Ukrainians back home, I mean those who were forced to leave Ukraine. So those are the recommendations of our European conference dating back to the last year, and I was among the first ones to start talking about this. This topic may not look very popular, but we think that there should be clear understanding of what are we discussing. We have to have a vision and to what extent we can get involved as organizations that work directly with the Ukrainians abroad, not only with our members, but also with those who have moved just recently and have not yet become members of our organizations. And to me, it seems that there is another important aspect: coordination at the level of the civil society, cooperation between diaspora women's organizations and Ukrainian women's organizations. Participation in URC was an incredible opportunity for networking. It enabled us to see many representatives of Ukrainian women's organizations personally, those whom I've been knowing for years but never had an opportunity to see personally, to meet personally, and meeting the new ones who devirtualized, so to say. And again, it was an important time to continue cooperation or to establish cooperation between diaspora and women's organizations in Ukraine. And it's not only about sistership and solidarity, but also such cooperation will allow us to see the real needs and to mobilize resources for specific for solution of specific problems, because as we stay in Ukraine, we don't have full understanding of the needs. I think this cooperation at the level of civil society will be very important for further inclusion and efficient involvement in the recovery processes. So there's a lot of ideas, a lot of prospects, but the things can't happen in vacuum, and we also need formalization, recognition of us as a subject of recovery, and further steps will also depend on the existing needs. Thank you, Ms. Mariana. Very much appreciated. And I would like to give the floor to Ms. Tetiana. We understand that in the URC fields, not only the key panels were taking place, there was a number of activities held on top of that. So I would like to ask you, have you heard a lot of mentions about gender equality, inclusion, taking into account the needs of men and women? In your opinion, can we already safely state that the systemic work has already started and there is no turning back? Thank you for this question. I was really coming to URC with such gender optics, and I was really curious about that thing that you've mentioned, to what extent this gender responsible recovery is being touched upon in different panels. And I can give you a personal impression. There was a lot of activities held. Obviously, you cannot take part in all of them, and we all have our perspective. And where I've been in all of the panels, there was mention about gender equality or gender responsible recovery. I would say that such tone was set by our First Lady during the plenary meeting. She said that first we have to recover the people, and the people will recover the rest of the things. And on top of that, before that, as Ms. Kateryna was mentioned, along with the colleagues, we were meeting the Alliance on Gender Responsible Inclusive Recovery, and in my opinion, the slogan was mentioned there by Christina Taitsky, and she said that inclusive development is not an option, is the precondition of efficient recovery. And I was taking part not only in the human resources level. I was also curious about the local level, because in an organization we work with the communities in Kharkiv region, and even during those panels that were presented in that dimension, it was mentioned that we have to take into account the interests of the people, we have to hear the community, we have to develop the women's leadership. The only thing, in my opinion, that was interesting, that it was mentioned either by the women or the men who represent some international agencies. There was a representative of the World Bank, of the European Investment Bank, European Union, and UNDP. So basically the representatives of international organizations that were mentioned in it. And unfortunately, I haven't heard it for a single time from our Ukrainian men who have some statuses. Those who are really involved in recovery processes in the region. So I think what we have to do is to work with the communities, because at the legislative level we have serious preconditions created for implementation of government gender policy to make sure that the gender equality becomes a part of our society. However, at the level of the communities, institutional mechanism for gender equality was not developed. And basically, in all of the communities where we work in Kharkiv region, the gender advisors are not present, as well as coordinators. They may be only formally present there. Sometimes they don't even know about it. So we have to be more active in our work with the communities at that level. And another thing, another dimension, in my opinion, is a close cooperation with the Ministry for Development of the Communities and Regions. The name keeps changing all the time, the Communities and Territories, I think. And I think through this ministry we need to work with the communities, because unfortunately those administrative things are still existing. So again, we have to approach this issue from different sides, to communicate it to civil organizations in informal way. But on the other hand, we should use administrative mechanisms too. Also, as a community of women's organizations, we need to make ourselves more visible among other civil organizations, because we did a lot within the last couple of years to have more women's organizations established, so that they exist in every community, because the existence of the organizations in the communities will become a pledge for the women's interest to be taken into account in the processes of recovery. So we see that not only the achievements of gender equality, but also the achievements of democracy, unfortunately, cannot stay here forever. It's not like we achieve it, we sit and celebrate the victory. It's an ongoing process. We have to keep fighting both for democracy and gender equality. That's why we have to stand united and to focus more on the influence on the decision makers. Thank you, Ms. Tetiana. We all understand that after your speech that we still have a lot of work to do. I would also like to have Ms. Nataliia Karbovska involved in our conversation. Ukrainian Women's Fund is presenting strategies during such activities, and Ms. Nataliia was presenting 10 blocks of gender-sensitive and inclusive recovery in URC this year. So, Ms. Nataliia, I would like to ask you a little bit about this document, first of all, and to ask you whether we can or what are we supposed to do to make sure that such document becomes a foundation of recovery of our country. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you for the question. Hello, Ms. Olga. It's not the first conference for me and Ukrainian Women's Fund, not the first recovery conference. We were coming there, well, me and my colleagues. I was representing Ukrainian Women's Fund and advisory panel as well as colleagues in the platform of the gender mainstreaming and inclusion in the recovery process. So we were coming to URC, to Rome, with a very specific goal: to communicate the voices of the women to those who make decisions. We were making, in fact, we had two very specific ways to do it. First of all, participation of the members of women's and feministic organizations. You know, based on my experience of participation in recovery conferences, I can say that every year the quality and quantity structure of women's and feministic civil organizations in URC is growing and improving. We've been working for those 2 days with a very intense English-speaking team. We were definitely not staying silent there. You know, it was a lot of mentions already about different activities in URC and side events within the alliance framework as a preparatory activities. We didn't keep silent. We were setting up new partnerships as well as representatives of our government, representatives of the businesses. We were also talking to the colleagues. We brought new partnerships from Europe, and it was interesting to me to see that those partnerships were not only with Italian organizations, but also with organizations from other countries, and a little bit with Ukrainians ones, with which unfortunately we didn't have opportunity to meet. We work in the same field, but we were never able to talk about partnership in Kiev. But in Rome, we've already agreed upon the first steps together. That's the strategy that I would like to intensify in future. Ms. Tetiana Kudina said the next meeting will be in Warsaw. Our numbers will be bigger in Warsaw. And I would set a goal for us to have at least twice as more representatives of women's and feministic organizations in Warsaw. Warsaw is not so distant from Ukraine, and we have to unite to make sure that our voices become louder in Warsaw. Another mechanism that were representative to make the voices of the women louder, to communicate them to those who make decisions, are the 10 blocks that you, Ms. Oleg, have mentioned. Let me show this book. It's visible, right? So 10 blocks on gender that we suggest to ensure a gender-inclusive approach for sustainable and inclusive development. Why 10 blocks are important? The government commissioner has mentioned in the beginning of our conversation about the large number of new agreements signed and about extensive support provided by our European partners. New contracts being signed by the businesses, the young women, as well as Ms. Kateryna, were talking about the new organizations joining the alliance. It's all about the money. And now it's important for us to use that opportunity to make sure that those investments will work as efficient as possible. And my biggest impression from this conference, from this year's conference in Rome, is that there is definitely political will at the international level to support the recovery of Ukraine, and it is very important. But, you know, I came back from Rome with two questions related to this statement. how to make sure that the practical implementation of the announced initiative is effective, how to ensure the practical implementation so that the representatives in the communities, those people we were talking about, how can we make sure those people benefit from those investments? And another question I brought from Rome is whether the political will is sufficient in Ukraine to make sure that the recovery is gender inclusive, and what else do we need to do to increase the amount of this political will? And here I would like to get back to 10 blocks, because it's an analytical product that offers systemic solutions, that offers methodologies and tools. This product is not authored by one expert or one person. It's a consolidated product of organizations that take part in advisory board of gender organizations at the platform of gender inclusion and recovery. More than 50 experts and organizations got united to develop this document. It contains very specific recommendations, and I would like just to cover them in brief. Like block 1, it's called gender-sensitive planning involving women's organizations. In this block, we offer very specific solutions and very specific joint steps for the government and the parliament, for the local authorities, for civil organizations, and our international partners, such, for example, as gender profiles of the communities and analysis of real needs of all groups of population, mandatory inclusion of women's organizations in task forces, and not only inclusion so that they just sit there, but inclusion with the right to vote. And those recommendations were very clearly outlined for the parliament, for the local authorities, etc., as I've just mentioned. Also, it contains the examples of successful initiatives that have already been implemented in Ukraine. We don't have to invent the wheel. We have to scale up the existing initiatives. That's why this document was presented by us even before URC in Rome and during our dedicated session that was devoted to the participation of women in recovery processes. And what's next? We are through URC. We are through 2 days in Rome. I'm just convinced that the fundamental work is only just starting now. Now, obviously, the conference in Rome is important for us to make sure we're on the same page, to make sure that we have support at the high level, that the matters of women's rights are included in the recovery programs. But now we start very meticulous practical work. I agree with Ms. Tetiana Kudina that now it's critically impossible to lose the momentum. And what are we going to do next as a women's fund? We want to talk shortly with all of the stakeholders, with those stakeholders with whom to whom we provide recommendations in this publication. We want to ask them what impedes them on the way of implementation of those 10 blocks. And this conversation will result in specific plans, what we have to do next to make sure we remove all of the obstacles in that way so that our recommendations start working and the recovery processes in the communities are more efficient. We've started coming to the communities with this product, and we will continue doing it, and we will continue developing methodologies. We will be working with the civil organizations as well as with our partners in the government to continue implementing the recommendations of the 10 blocks. And it's also important to continue monitoring to use the 10 blocks to monitor how efficient are those recovery programs that are already working in Ukraine with the support of our international partners, and we rely on the cooperation with the Office of the Government Commissioner and of other partners in the government. Obviously, it won't be efficient without the support of the alliance, and we invite everyone to cooperation. We have good cooperation already, but we would like to intensify it, you and women and all of the colleagues who are part of the alliance. And I would like to finalize my speech. You know, my colleagues were mentioning different quotes. I would like to quote what's written in this document, in this leaflet that we were disseminating during URC. Let me put it in English and then translate it into Ukraine. A famous term, build back better, right? We're about gender mainstreaming and inclusion in recovery, and also about transformation, how to do things better and more efficient. So we've made this term more efficient. We've transferred it. We say build back with me and better for all. And in Ukrainian, it sounds like building back with the women will benefit everybody. Well, for Ukrainian Women's Fund, for the advisory panel of the civil organizations, for the platform of gender mainstream and recovery, this slogan will become the slogan of the year. And until next URC in Warsaw, I encourage you to join us, to spread the slogan, to populate it with sense, advocate, monitor, and to make sure the recovery programs that have already been started in Ukraine work for the benefit for everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nataliia. Thank you for your perspective. It's really valuable to hear your opinion, your critical opinion, but at the same time, it was quite an inspiring meeting that tells us that incredible people are moving the world. It's really important. I would like to thank everybody for taking part in today's press conference. I would like to thank you for representation in URC. That's really important for everybody, and for the synergy of the state and civil sector, international partners. I'm confident that without it, it will really be difficult to move any process. Thank you for this. And obviously, I would like to thank our security and defense forces, thanks to whom we are staying here and holding events like this. And glory to Ukraine.